Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April 23rd meeting of the Facilities Committee. We have everybody from the committee members online: Christina Helms, Melissa Merrill, Matt Helms, and myself. I call this meeting to order. The next, and I apologize for being late, our last meeting from finance ran overtime, so that's why we're starting a little bit later. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I would like to add one thing to the agenda. Excuse me, under 3, I would like to make E, bond request. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 4-0, thank you very much. Next item for action is open session meeting minutes for approval from January 20th, February 19th, March 18th, and April 7th. If everybody's taken a look at them, and I will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Oh, approved. Thank you very much. Next is the reassignment proposal that we looked at last time that went to the full board at the April meeting for our first reading, and this is the second reading. Everything is the same except for on your memo on the bottom, when Mr. Burnett and Mr. Obram looked at what we were doing, we created an island, an isolated area that wasn't contiguous to Newtown's zone. So there's no UCPS students in that area, and we proposed reassigning that small area that was contiguous to the WAXHAW Parkwood along with the unnamed subdivision. Again, no kids in it, and most of it is undeveloped. So this, I would need a motion to request that the Facilities Committee recommend to the full board to reassign the above listed subdivision and noted adjacent parcels to the listed schools at the May board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 That's 4-0 to send to the full board at the May 5th meeting. Thank you very much. Next is planning. And which are we doing first? Forest Hills?
We're doing Forest Hills.
Okay, Forest Hills first.
Good morning, everybody. We decided to put Forest Hills and Parkwood together this month to do two things. One, there's not as much to discuss with Forest Hills and Parkwood, and also to try to get through all the clusters before the end of the school year to allow some flexibility over the summer. So we'll move forward with that at the pleasure of the board and see how it goes.
Okay.
With the Forest Hills cluster, some planning considerations. The second slide shows the heat map, if you will, the dot map, showing where the concentration of the K-12 students are. And obviously they are concentrated around the 3 municipalities of Marshville, Wingate, and Monroe. The next slide shows our current status. You'll see all of the schools are below 100% capacity. Wingate is the closest to its capacity, and there are the enrollments and the mobile classrooms there as well. The next slide is the development. Notice that it is not the entire Forest Hills cluster that's shown. This is because there are only 2 developments that are really of interest here, the blue and the purple on this map. And the next slide will show some details about that. Oakton also is also known as, I should say, Cottage Green, is in Monroe, near on 601 South, right near the intersection of White Store Road. as you drive down 601, you can easily see the development going on. 218 total units. There are 3 currently occupied that didn't make it onto the slide, which leaves 215 to be built. One thing I would note is that after some research, I've found that there are quite a few housing permits that have been issued by the city of Monroe for that subdivision. So we expect quite a few houses to be going up in the next few months. The other development is in planning. It's called Greenway at Lake Lee, almost across the street from Oakton. This has been in planning for several years, and I've not seen any activity on it, but we are keeping it on the radar. And then the final slide for Forest Hill shows the cluster cohorts. This is fairly typical for the Forest Hills cluster. The 11th and 12th grades are considerably less, but being as the schools are not in any kind of utilization problems, then I don't see an issue here. It's just something we will continue to track, particularly as the development moves down the bypass from the Indian Trail area. I think we'll start seeing over the next 5 years some additional interest in some development along the bypass. And that completes the Forest Hills cluster. To move on to the Parkwood cluster, again, we start with a dot map of the student distribution. Very widespread. There is some concentration, obviously, right around Waxhaw. And here's our current status of schools in the forest or the Parkwood area. Again, there are no schools that are in any kind of trouble there. The next slide will show development. It appears that there's quite a bit of development. As we'll see in following slides, there are a fair number of subdivisions, but many of them are quite small. And again, the color coding will match the spreadsheets that we see on the next slides. And here we have prospects, and you can see that 5 active subdivisions for a total of 45 homes yet to be built. So not a real concern there, but something we continue to track. Waxhaw development is considerably more. The total didn't make it onto the slide, but it's just under 1,500. There are several that are active, one of which Grove Manor is a 55 plus subdivision. Millbridge, this is the area south of the boundary that was defined in the last realignment. And then the rest is fairly self-explanatory. I would mention that Roan Creek Station in the planning color has been in planning for several years and have not seen any activity on it. So we're not sure whether that's going to come to fruition or not, but we'll keep it on the radar for now. Then in Western Union, there's just under 700 homes yet to be built in the subdivisions that we're tracking. One new one that is in planning that we're interested in is Orchard Creek. This is just on the north side of the Stonebridge development, and has just come across our desks within the last couple of months. But again, this I think is fairly self-explanatory. And then we'll move to the Parkwood cluster cohorts.
Brian, can I ask a question?
Of course.
So that the sheet doesn't include the Wren Creek development, that if we move that on May 5th, that would go into there as well. for
That's
Western.
correct. That's correct. It does not include it because it's not yet
Not
formally.
there
made.
yet, right, okay, just checking, thank you. Okay,
And Parkwood cluster cohorts, again, the schools are not in trouble as far as utilization goes. So we do not see any issues. In fact, based on this, the shape of the curve that would be generated, it would seem that we would have fairly well declining cohorts over the next 5 years. Although the development, particularly in the Waxhaw area, could affect that somewhat.
yes. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you very much. So which clusters do we have left?
We have Piedmont and Monroe are the remaining 2 clusters.
Okay,
And if it's okay with the board, I will plan on presenting both of those at the May meeting.
that would be awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up is the construction update.
Okay, let's start with the transportation project. And we often talk about the negative. So let me start off with that project's going well, has been going well. It's a pretty smooth project, but I do need to tell you about one issue that is definitely on the radar. I have mentioned it before, and that's a significant or potentially significant rock issue with the offsite utilities. That's the water and the sewer. So we are working through that. We did look at some alternative locations, alternative routes for the water and sewer, which is a big deal to consider, looking at different routes because of all the engineering that needs to be done, all the permitting that needs to be done. It really would take up a lot of time and money, but all of that effort would be in an effort to eventually and overall save money. What we have found so far is that the alternative routes that we've looked for have encountered rock as well. So we're thinking that there probably isn't going to be a benefit in going in an alternative route. We did get some good news on one of the locations. We have 2 locations of rock. One of the locations we are going to be able to change how we were going to go through that rock. And so that will be a time saver and a cost savings at that one location. So we do have the other location. We won't know and won't be able to quantify how much this costs until after we go through it. So that's the one bad thing about dealing with rock. And in this particular case, of course, the big concern is that we do have some allowance money. We do think that it's highly likely that we will exceed our allowance money on that. So we will have to potentially find additional funds for the project. That is something we've been working on. But you can see from the pictures, especially of the transportation bays, that the project's coming along very nicely. We do anticipate that barring the water and sewer issue, we're really 2 months out on that, and
That's awesome.
it's coming along well. So
Great.
Sun Valley, any questions on transportation?
No.
Sun Valley High School, again, we often focus on the negative. One item that did come up, and we've mentioned this before in weekly update, but the site grading contractor has gone out of business. The branch is working with the bonding company to replace that contractor. That effort is underway. And it's something, we'll see how that goes. Certainly the bonding company will be an instrumental part on whether we make a nice, smooth, quick transition. And in some cases, they've already gotten some approvals from the bonding company. In other cases, they have not received the approvals. And so those items that they have not received approvals on, of course, they wouldn't be moving forward. But if you see the pictures, you see that it is progressing nicely. The finishes are coming together. As far as new construction, weight room building that is under construction now. And so that's
There's
something.
one thing that's missing from this update. It's big, it's outside, you play football in it and soccer, and how's that going?
Okay, so there is a picture of the.
I knew I was gonna ask.
There's a picture of the field house. So that's the picture with the lockers and things like that. That is the field house. That is at the stadium. As far as the flat work is concerned, which is the concrete sidewalks, things like that, that is mostly complete. I
So
would
the
have to check.
The site grading contractor has stuff to do at the stadium as well, I assume?
They do with the track. So what the track is constructed. What the grading contractor scope needed to be was to, number one, ensure that we did have the compaction and the moisture content that is required, and that has been tested, over the last several months a couple of times. But prior to paving, of course, we would have to do it again. Grading contractor also would have to essentially skim off some of the gravel that's there to get it to the right elevation. It is high, and that was done intentionally, all knowing that they would come back and skim that off. So, and then once they got that, another contractor would be taking over the track from that point. And the tennis courts, that's where they're also just have a little bit of work there, but really another contractor will be taking over, much of that scope. We did install a French drain on the football field. That's been installed. That's complete. It appears to be doing the job that we wanted it to do. The contractor. I'm sorry.
So if there's a football season this fall, they're going to play in it, right?
We don't see any reason why they wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to say, Mark, you've been doing a great job putting updates on Twitter recently. And I just have to say, living on a different part of the county and not driving past Sun Valley as often as Mrs. Heintel, I've really enjoyed your updates and seeing videos.
I thought the stadium wasn't being mentioned yet because we were waiting for a Twitter pun from Mr. Strickland.
I know, he's been hilarious with his songs.
Okay, I have no content, so that's what I provide. I do want to say, though, Dave and I were out there Tuesday, I think, walking through and looking at some things. So where we stand right now, school has been delayed. Obviously, the governor is going to make a decision about some stuff today. There is a silver lining in some of this. If school is canceled for the rest of the year, that will free us up to turn the contractor loose to begin the interior work, namely revised office area, but most importantly, renovating the cafeteria kitchen area. So whatever word we hear today, we'll move forward with that.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving along.
Yeah, and we have been doing some interior work with, there's a group restroom that's being renovated, and unit ventilators are being installed in the classrooms. But like Mark said, we're waiting on some of the bigger scope work to see if we're going to have a lot of time that's going to be put together. And then it's really on the capital projects. We do have a lot of capital projects. If there's anything you want any information on, be happy to answer that.
One question.
Sure.
In Rural High School, it says that this is their turf that we tracked and their turf that we approved last month, I believe.
Yes.
He said the construction phase is currently scheduled from June to October. So
Right.
will they not be playing on their home field?
So yeah, that's phased, and there's several things on that. One, we are trying to reach out to the contractor to see, hey, can you start earlier? And we feel pretty safe, that we aren't going to be using that field this spring. But we have reached out, number one, to see if we can get an earlier start. Number two, the work is phased such that the football field would be complete before the August, first game.
Okay,
But the track would be a later phase, and that work would still be going on.
okay.
And we've got, that's it for that project.
Okay. I noticed too that the Porter Ridge High School baseball field is moving along. That's true up funds from the county that was approved at the April 20th Board of County Commissioners meeting. So we thank them for getting us the money early so that we can get some stuff done, so that we can get a lot of stuff done over the summer. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was a very big one for us. It was
That's
a
huge.
lot of stress that just went away.
That's great. So I didn't have any more questions. Anybody else? Okay. Change order. That's just an FYI, right? The change order, do you need?
That's right. And if there's any questions on that, be happy to answer. Also would just add, again, as I mentioned before, for the transportation project, that the rock that you see on that item, which is $6,979, is not the rock that we're talking about at the offsite utilities. That's going to be much more than that. And that's it for change orders.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The last is just the building permit history for anybody who needs it. So I think that is all the stuff on the agenda. Our next meeting will be May 5th before the Board of Education meeting, in case we.
3E.
Oh, sorry, bond. We added bond. The only reason we wanted to add the bond is we are probably going to have a work session next week. And we would like you to send the bond information to the full board so that we can discuss a bond, whether or not we're going to ask for a bond for 2020. So if you could do that, that would be great. That's all I really wanted.
Be happy to.
Thank you. Okay, the next meeting is May 5th, in case we have bids, I assume, before the Board of Education meeting?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So now we have closed session, which we'll all log off of this and then go on to that. But I need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-131 for consideration of bids, NCGS 143-318.10 and 11 to review closed session minutes, NCGS 143-318.11A5 to consider acquisition of real property.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. So we'll get out of this and get into the next one. Thank you, everyone.